views and opinions expressed in this podcast by the host or the guest do not necessarily reflect the views of Paranormal Buzz Radio or its sponsors. Use of any material produced by Paranormal Buzz Radio without express written consent is strictly prohibited. For information on everything Paranormal Buzz Radio has to offer, visit our website, paranormalbuzzradio.com. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to Phantom Science, the podcast, where we discuss how to prove it's not just all in your head. Does the paranormal exist? If it does, how does it work? And how do we gather solid indications and data? During this podcast, we will be discussing things that many people may hold near and dear to themselves. If you feel offended at any point, just take a deep breath and think about the thing that offended you. Because we will be playing the role of the recently declawed Office of Devil's Advocate. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. And thank you very much for listening.
Good evening and welcome to Phantom Science. Tonight I'm going to play you an interview that I took with a guy called Feek, who lives in Michigan, belongs to a couple of paranormal groups, and we got in contact basically because he sent me an email. He read my book. I've never met him, and he read my book. He shot me an email saying it felt like I wrote the book and I've never written a book, because what was written in the book is exactly what he's struggling with in his group. So we sent emails backwards and forth, and lo and behold, I'm not alone anymore, which is something I struggle with. Trying to tell people, hey, what you're doing isn't sound or isn't based in anything. And obviously, not most popular person in the paranormal community. And now there's two of us. So the guy is awesome. He's very interesting. His technical knowledge is above mine. He can. I was trying to get a software-defined radio to work as a spirit box, and I was getting closer and closer, but keep putting it on the back burner because it's outside of my skill set. I'm not really a programmer, and he very kindly lent me a copy of his because he's already done it. He's also built a number of other devices that I've had in my head for a while. I wanted to use, for example, the Tesla crystal radio to be able to listen to electronic fields instead of just seeing lights flash. Well, he's already built one. So the guy's really cool, and so I'm going to give you a Skype interview we did. The sound isn't the best because I still struggle with Skype, and every now and then you can hear my dogs barking because it was a sunny Sunday afternoon. So without much more ado, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Feek.
Let's just go with some basic stuff, if you don't mind.
No problem.
Just to give some background, what do you do for a living?
I'm a network systems administrator and also a programmer. So I work for a large construction company, and I make sure all their servers, networks, routers, VPNs, programming, custom software. So that's what I do. Computer guy, basically.
Snap. Although I don't program as much anymore, so I'm weak on that. But are you in a paranormal group at the moment?
Yeah, and my biggest thing is every group I've seen seems to emulate the TV more than they do the science, and it's frustrating for me. I go up a couple times. Yeah, they're nice people. They want good things, but they don't give me what I need. I mean, they just, everybody's moving around, everybody's doing things. They're playing with cheesy gadgets that they bought off of some ghost shop. It's like, okay, well, maybe if we sat here quiet for 5 minutes, we'd hear something, It's frustrating.
God bless you. I thought it was just me.
No, it's not just you.
Man, I'm getting old and crotchety or something.
No. And I'm no spring chicken myself, so.
Yeah. How often do you go out roughly in a year, just on average?
Well, because I bounce from group to group, kind of, I probably get in 10, 12 a year. Sometimes pretty close to one a month.
That's pretty cool.
And I'm in a lot of things other than ghost hunting, like, science and ham radio stuff, astronomy clubs, things like that. So, I can't just dedicate all my time to ghost hunting, but I was an instructor at college for 6 years and I taught electronics. Mm-hmm. So this is how I get to build all these little gadgets and toys. And, I hear of an idea. It's like, oh, well, I could build one of those, and I play with it and I get it working and then I use it myself. But sometimes I can't, I've been unable to explain it to other people, or they look at it and they're like, well, it doesn't have flashy lights, so I don't know what to do with it.
Well, this is down my list, but since we're kind of in that area, so I'm gonna ask you. There's a couple of things here that I don't know if I struggle with them or not, but just your opinion on some of these with your background on some of these. So let's start off with the basics that everyone seems to have. K2 meters.
All right. So I actually borrowed one from our paranormal group because I don't own one myself. I took it apart. I probed it. It does what it's advertised to do. It looks for 60 hertz AC wiring electromagnetic field. That thing it does well. The unfortunate thing is, unless the building has no power, everywhere throughout the building, the thing can go off for no known reason other than, there's an electric field and it happens to be a power wire running through the wall, an electric motor started up on a air conditioner or a refrigerator, or, somebody flipped a light switch somewhere. Anything that causes a flood of electromagnetic energy, the thing's going to show LEDs. So yes, it works. It does what it was supposed to do from the factory as being finding sources of EMF. As ghost hunting, it has one major flaw. You have no way to differentiate whether it was your cell phone, a power wire, a ghost, or any other thing when it flips its lights out, when it shows lights. So it's a secondary or a third level tool after you've done other things to figure that out. Now, that being said, again, I've built a device that lets you physically hear the EMF. Okay? Mm-hmm. So now you can identify it. So you can carry your K2 around. You get a bunch of blippy lights. You use my device. You press the button and you listen. If you hear the 60 cycle hum, it's a power line. If you hear a bunch of chirps and clicks, it's a cell phone or an internet router or something like that. Mm-hmm. Now, if you heard voices or you hear things like that, and now you got that stuff.
Yeah.
That cannot happen naturally.
And my thing with the K2s from the get-go, once you understand what they do, and then, you're watching these shows and you're like, this doesn't mean anything, but the defining experience I had with the K2 was we were in a coach house, a Granger House in Marion, Iowa.
Okay.
And someone was getting a reading, and there's no power back there, but someone kept getting this reading on a ride-on lawnmower.
Okay.
And I'm like, that's weird. And I brought I've got a tri-field that, you can test.
Oh, that's a nice meter. That tri-field's a nice scientific level meter.
And I wasn't getting anything on the EMF, but when I switched it to radio, it was matching what the K2 was doing.
Yes.
So there's no shielding. Radio.
Yes, the K2 is a plastic housed instrument, and it can go clear up into the gigahertz range. Somebody could be microwaving their coffee in the other room, and that K2 is going to be slammed.
Yeah.
And there's no way for you to know what it is.
No. So I guess really the point from that is get something like a trifield, really.
Yeah, trifields are good. And like I say, a K2 with another instrument, the K2 might be a nice indicator to give you the quick lights flash. Okay, there's something here, we don't know what. Yeah. Then you can switch to a more sophisticated meter and or, like I say, a listening device or whatever, so you can positively identify, okay, this is definitely a power line. This is a computer. This is a cell phone. This is a router. So that's why I had built that device, because, I got so frustrated with everybody saying, oh, there's a ghost. I'm in a stairwell. There's no outlets here. It's like, well, yeah, but the wires run behind the walls,
Okay, well, let's move on. Like you said, it's the basic ghost shop stuff. And what annoys me about them is they advertise it as it will detect ghosts. If they leave that,
and mostly all they are is crude EMF detectors or crude ionization detectors. Because there's two types of electromagnetic radiation. There's the ionizing type, which is basically your static electricity, your ion created by like thunderstorms, things like that. And then there's the actual EMF, electromagnetic fields, that are caused by power lines, computers. I mean, basically any piece of electronics emits them. So, but even like the periscope thing that they show as one of the science things, it's just an ion detector. And then the lights go which way or the other, depending whether they're positive or negative ions. I built one myself just because I wasn't going to spend $100 for the thing, and it cost me $10-15 to build it. It does the same thing. I don't have as many lights as they do, so maybe it's not as cool for TV, but hey,
See, and that's the thing. And we'll get onto that later, but
yeah,
I sometimes get daggers looked at me just because, you're like, wait a minute. As soon as you say that, wait a minute, that's it, everything. What do you mean? So, all right, that's, so, and then leading into that, we go, so Bill Chappell at Digital Dowsing keeps coming out with some of this stuff, and I look at it and I palm slap, it's.
Yeah, the digital dowsing thing, and that guy, I mean, he's a fairly smart electrical engineer, but he builds things, I think I think originally when he started, he was very intent on building devices that could really help. But then when the cash started flowing in, it ended up being, what can I build that'll make the most lights and the most flash so the most people will buy it?
I guess the one that really did it for me, well, I mean, apart from reading what they're supposed to do, but things like the Ovilus,
that thing's silly. So basically the way that device works is it takes electromagnetic readings from the air, converts them into random numbers, and then that random number then picks a syllable or a piece of a word or a whole word and plays it out the speaker with some echo to make it sound creepy.
Yep.
That's basically how the thing works.
What I don't understand about it is, and once again, it's a point I want to get to later on, but I mean, if you are a ghost, how do you know how to pick a word? The words are all in binary on a chip. I mean,
you are correct. There is, my view on it is basically they can't, because number one, typically ghosts, if they exist, came from a time in the past. The technology to do the Ovilus has existed for probably no more than 15 or 20 years. Probably not even. So if they are older than that, they don't know nothing about technology. I would think that they could influence a compass if they did electromagnetic fields, because they've had compasses since the 1600s. They could turn on and off a lamp because they've had those, since the turn of the century. Technology is they've seen, or at least seen close enough to understand. Sure, they could have some influence on it. But to me, to get into a chip or get into a or realize that, okay, I changed the fluctuation of the magnetic field by so many milligauss, and now this word comes out. I don't have any idea how they would figure that out. I mean, even as a person of modern technology and understanding how it works would take months of time to realize how much do I have to send to get this word to come out. I just can't see it. I don't know. I mean, it's a neat concept and it sounds cool. I've heard a couple of them work, but the percentage of hits, where something matched the context of what we were talking about in the room is basically low.
Yeah.
10% or less.
Yeah, it's basic mathematics of a coin flip, chance of coincidence.
Correct. Absolutely.
And then plus you've got words like coffin and stuff like that in there. That should be a dead giveaway as far as that. If anybody that wants to, let's say you find a pygmy tribe in the jungle and you want to find some constant words where you can learn the language, I don't think coffin would make that list.
But, wouldn't be the first choice.
No. Okay. And then here's one that I struggle with because I started using, like, the spirit box. I started using that, just totally debunk it. I'm like, so you're hearing words on the radio, However, there are some places where I've had that give me more hits than what I would consider, the coin flip coincidence kind of thing.
And I have actually experienced that exact same thing. Because when I first saw one of the old converted Radio Shack spirit boxes, with the clicky, click, 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 it's like really annoying sound. I'm like, okay, what are they going to do with this? They were playing with it on a table. It was, I was just new to the ghost group. I didn't really know what to expect. So I just kept my mouth shut and listened. And basically, I would say 60 to 70% of the answers that we got that were clear enough to tell what they were for words were in context. Mm-hmm. Now, how that happens, it's kind of a frustrating mystery to me because theoretically you're just scanning through FM radio stations, picking up snippets of music, commercials, DJs, who knows what. Mm-hmm. But somehow, like I said, it's 60, 70%. It's not 100, but it's not less than 50. And that is a thing, that's part of the reason I wrote the software that I did, because number one, I didn't like that annoying click sound. And I wanted it to be a nice, smooth transition between the stations. And also, I typically bring my laptop to investigation. So I thought, hey, why don't I use my software-defined radio, whip up a little short program to make SDR sharp scan. And, lo and behold, I got the same thing. Now, we have used both devices at several random events. The hit rate for the laptop and the hit rate for the SB7 or whatever other one they were using, or the 11, were nearly identical. So whatever the mechanism is, it's been at least somewhat consistent. So I haven't thrown the thing in the trash yet.
Yeah.
So that's all I can tell you. I don't know anymore. If I did, I'd let you know.
And so we did, and the video's out there, and I can send you a link if you haven't seen it. But we started to, the last one, my take on that is to experiment with the amount of hits we get, and then to really do it. So I built a spirit box. It's not programmed, it's an analog one, and it goes through. But you push a button, and basically it's like a radio.
Oh, is that the old antique radio looking thing?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I saw that one. That was a nice. You did a good job. That was a nice, smooth, quiet transition between the stations.
Thank you.
Yeah,
but see, the argument is when you listen to the people that do the ITC, is do the ghosts use the white noise, or are they somehow manipulating the radio signals and the words, that are out there? So what I wanted to do was take that one only does radio. There's no white noise between it, or very little. So then I know if I'm getting a lot with that, then it's using the radio stations. We've also got one, I got a shortwave where we tried to do the battery method where you go down to like 6 megahertz shortwave. It just
understood.
Yeah. So, but what we did to test it is we got a piece of paper with a bunch of words on it. The people can't see what the paper is. And I sit there and I point to certain words to see if they'll come out the radio. And sometimes they do.
I know. I saw your little blip on that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing that I had a theory was that the ghosts can maybe, because they are, or if they are electromagnetic entities, they might be feeling the vibrations of those radio waves, the frequencies, and have timed it such that they can hit on the same word or certain words. Now, so in order to test that, I put an option in my software to randomize not only how fast it scans, but how long it stays at each station. Mm-hmm. Now, when you hit that random, now you get short clips, long clips, different speeds of clips. Like different spacings as it goes through the stations. And the strange thing was still that did not seem to affect the percentage of in-context words. So that confused me as well. It's like, okay, now I've randomed it up. So the ghost can't say, okay, every so many milliseconds, let's stop it and capture a word. Didn't happen. Now it's random. It's just completely random. So unless they can read the processor in the computer and know what the next random interval is going to be, they can't use that as a mechanism. And like I say, I still got 60, 70%, just a little over 50% context. So I don't know how it works.
No, but I can't rule out the human brain and our psychology and how.
Because paranoia. Paranoia can always get you.
So when we did that test, the reason that somebody was sitting across the table and we had a screen in front, they didn't know what the words were. And they picked up, as I was picking up, oh yeah, that's a hit, and I'm marking it down. They didn't hit one. The people that couldn't see the words, which to me was like...
Which means it's in the human mind, most likely.
I'm like, is it or isn't it though? It's because there's another argument to that somebody brought up that I can't dismiss either, which is if somebody is mumbling and you're behind them, you can't understand what they're saying. But if you're looking at their facial expressions and their mouth movements, it's easier to understand what they're saying. So is that happening or is it pareidolia? So I've got to figure out something to...
We got to come up with an experiment that can get around it.
Yeah, but that's good. That's fun. That's why we do it. Always, halving the half, I guess. So, and then the other side of that is the apps. So we use the spirit of that. What's your opinion on the apps?
Well, because most of the apps they either use one of two things. They use the Hall effect sensor that's inside the phone, which provides them electromagnetic field information. It's the same thing that makes the phone's compass work. Mm-hmm. So it truly is a reasonably okay instrument. I've tested my phone with some EMF apps and then measured against my EMF meter. The readings were similar enough to call it, okay, it can read that stuff. Mm-hmm. So they either use that and they pretend like they're an Ovilus, or they make some little lights on the screen light up. Okay, it's basically the same thing as a K2. Mm-hmm. If they are using the FM radio built into the phone, then they're scanning through channels just like a spirit box. Then it's basically a spirit box. I don't think it's any better or any worse. It's just a different medium for picking it up.
A lot of groups out there are pretty much carbon copying a lot of the shows without realizing that the shows have producers and they have to, produce entertainment.
Sure.
So what do you think, how could we maybe try to increase the role of science and objectivity in these groups and make it more appealing for them to use that?
Well, let's see. How would I approach that? I think that I would basically start by actually having classroom time, not on site, not at the investigation. Sit down and say, all right, look, I know this is the boring part. You're not going to like this part, but here's some ground rules. Here's some things, here's how our group takes data. Try to give them some form of standardization. Try to get them to spend, more time on instruments that give you numbers and things that you can do stuff on, and don't have flashy lights, etc. that you can't, aside from videotaping them flashing, you can't get any information from them. Now, the other thing is for the ones that are more mathematically adept, introducing them to some statistics like real scientists would use when they are proving a hypothesis. And that's a thing that I actually had written some software to help the ghost community do. It's a little more complex than the average ghost hunter would be used to, but I've used it on numerous investigations, and I think it could be something that a couple classroom sessions and somebody seeing it actually work, even an average person could get it to function.
Yeah.
And so I think that's important because that takes the human error out of it. So I'll give you like a 2-minute explanation of how it works. So when I arrive on site to an investigation, I will put out about 6 to 10 instruments on a table, and I will videotape the instruments so that I can see every change of every number, every whatever. There's a EMF meter, a compass, a watch to get a time with, a Geiger counter, a couple ionospheric monitors, all kinds of stuff. Then I will leave the site for an hour or two and let them take readings. Then we will come in, sit down near the instruments. Everybody turns their cell phones off, and we will do an EVP session, and we'll record the whole time. Then we'll go in the other part of the building. We'll do other things, let it continue recording, come back, maybe do 1 or 2 more EVP sessions, maybe 15, 20-minute long ones. Then what I do is when I take that video back to my house, I go through the video and I note in a spreadsheet all of the instrument readings, like every minute, take an instrument reading.
Mm-hmm.
I keep all that. So then I have a piece of software that I wrote that will take A and B. So you can take the baseline numbers, you can take the numbers you took during the 15-minute EVP session. You can put those into the software, and it will give you a statistical analysis called a p-value that scientists use to determine, do I really have change, or something is different, or is it just more noise and garbage and random numbers?
Mm-hmm.
And basically, if you get a p-value of less than 0.5, which is the scientific standard, there is a very high probability that what you're seeing a change in the readings versus the baseline of just sitting there.
Yeah.
In which case, then you could say, all right, now I've got some concrete evidence that something has changed. I don't know what yet, but while we're doing sessions, we always get these certain reading changes, but while we're not doing sessions, we don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a thing I've been experimenting with. The trouble is getting my group's people to settle down long enough to do it, to not want to just rush in and start running randomly throughout the building, not making noise everywhere, not messing with the instruments, not talking loudly and goofing off and whatever they do.
Yep.
Just sit down and let it happen. And it's almost like I'd rather do an investigation like that with only one other person.
Yep.
One person for safety, and then just do the thing. But everybody wants to come to every investigation, so you got 10 guys wandering around, and it's hard. So
no, we keep ours. We're WTF, my original group. We kept it to 3 or 4.
Yeah, and that would be great.
Yeah, and then with Phantom Science, active, there's myself and Nico. We usually have a couple other guest people come with us, so we try and keep it to 4.
4 is a good number. 4 is a good number, but it's hard because you have a group and they all like, hey, we don't do very many investigations. We all want to go, and you got 20 people. 15 of them show up, you're like, well, you can't just throw them out. So it's difficult. But anyways, the idea is to use statistics and real scientific, the same things a scientist or a physicist would use, use that for paranormal. Now, that being said, I think only once did I actually get numbers where it actually indicated that during our EVP session, it wasn't this, it was outside of the baseline. So that's a little bit hard on our field, because that means that obviously they can't really touch all these meters, or they can't really do things with them, or not very often, or maybe we only hit one haunted place. But, that makes it say like, all right, do I want to really bring this whole carload of crap, or should I just bring a voice recorder and a pencil, paper, and a compass and sit down and see if I can get them to do something,
Sometimes I'll show up with all the gear, and sometimes I'm like, look, I just want to concentrate on one piece of data on this investigation.
And that's a good thing to do as well. I agree 100%.
Yeah, just bring a couple of things. Interacting with the equipment. So we built, we call it the ghost feeder. So basically, it's just a metal detector that sits upright like a radar.
I saw them on your videos.
Yeah. So the idea was ghost feeders are rubbish. The ones they sell, it's like a 9-volt motor spinning around. But
I saw that. I was laughing.
Yeah, I mean, this one puts out pretty good energy. So I thought, well, if we get a plus, if anything feeds off it and reflects it back, it goes off. It should never go off unless there's pieces of metal floating through the air. But we do have it go off in the middle of the room for no reason. And I can't help but think, okay, maybe there's a capacitor discharge in there every now and then. You never know. So, however, we were at the Squirrel Cage Jail in Western Iowa.
Yep.
And it wouldn't go off where everything was metal down in the jail. When we went up to the 4th floor apartment, it started going off every now and then. And we did the experiment of, okay, I left the camera on it all on its own, and then we do a 10-minute session asking questions. We weren't on it, but, we were by it. And we found that with interaction, it was going off like 5 times as much as with no interaction. So, that's subjective data, but it's still something I'd like to continue to do and see if it, if there's a...
Sure. So I have one simple question. When you guys do your observations, does people all just keep their cell phones on their belts? Because if they do and they're all standing around there, the cell phone, especially if it's struggling to find a tower, will send off quite a large electromagnetic field, and it could trigger. So if you got 4 or 5 guys standing there with their cell phones, even if they're in their pocket not talking on them, they could set them off. And then when you guys go away, they quit doing it because they're too far away.
They're on, but they're all but mine are set to aircraft.
Okay, and that's fine. Aircraft mode is fine.
Yeah. The only reason mine isn't is because I'm on call 24/7, 365. So, but yeah, and it could be my cell phone doing it. You're right. So that's something to check.
So that's it. And then, over the last couple of days, I attempted to build a wireless ghost feeder.
Mm-hmm.
It works, but it doesn't have enough range for what I want to do, so I may have to adjust the design. So basically what it does is it sends a shortwave frequency signal as a tiny little transmitter that runs off a 9-volt battery. It should run 40, 50 hours off of that battery with its current draw. So anything that gets near its antennas will cause a shift in its frequency, because I didn't lock the oscillator to exact frequency. I let it drift with capacitance.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody comes within a couple feet of it and it starts moving its frequency just out of natural, the way it works.
Mm-hmm.
So you can place the thing on the other side of the house. If a cat walks by it, a person walks by, anything that piece of metal laid next to it, you will be able to see that on the spectrum analyzer. I gave that little short demo video.
Yeah.
It's working fine. It does exactly what I intended, but with only a 9-volt battery as power, I can't get enough power to go more than maybe 30 to 50 feet, which for some big buildings wouldn't be enough. You could be in the next room and it works fine. You just can't go across a high school or something.
No, but I'll be honest with you. I personally, I prefer the short range and concentrate in an area that is supposed to be, quote, small.
The other thing that's nice about it is it has an adjustment on it. So if you built like 4 identical units, you could place them around in a room and every one could run simultaneously, and you could see on the screen simultaneously all of them going. And if nothing touches them, the spectrum graph should just be a straight line. If anything is moving around and goes near each of them, you will see the waver in the line. So you could then do velocity calculations, you could do heading calculations, you could do all kinds of things because you can see the exact timing of the fluctuations. So with the views that obviously we share, and we circulate in the paranormal community, they have a thing called Para-Unity, where everybody's supportive of everybody. Now, personally, I think that it shouldn't exist because in the scientific community, you put things out for peer review. They tell you what the problem with that is, and then you revise it. With people in, the community we go around, and there are some people with some extreme ideas, and nobody says that's not helpful or that's not used, So the problem is it's a belief system. You got the 2 camps, the yeses and the nos. And if they're a yes, I mean, you could have a piece of quartz laying on your thing and they touch it and say, yeah, there's a ghost here, But then you go the other way and you got the skeptics, and you could show them statistical readings for months and at a location, they'd be like, it's just hogwash. They can't affect the instrument.
Yeah.
And so the problem is you can't prove yes, you can't prove no. And everybody, and the yes people tend to be the most enthusiastic. And so every drop of evidence you put on your website, they're excited about it.
Or every drop of no evidence, to be honest.
And they won't give you an honest opinion, or everything they see is a ghost. So I don't know.
Yes, but how do you handle people like that? I mean, I know how I do it because everyone's like...
basically, for the most part, if they comment, I just say something, neutral. Yeah, thanks for looking at my stuff, like that. And I just I don't encourage them to keep doing it, but I don't flat out, because I don't like dumpster fire flame wars. I don't want to start a flame war. So I just say, yeah, thanks for looking at my stuff. I'll show you more stuff if I get it, and I don't really push it either way.
Yeah. Okay. Because I use, personally, I try and depends what mood I'm in, but I try and answer it with a question saying, well, how do you think that works? And try and make them dig into their own belief. So I guess. Yeah.
And I probably should do that more. Maybe I'll change my ways.
No.
For the most part, I just neutral. I just be like,
yeah,
thanks for watching.
So, because I talked to a physicist, Marco Massi, and we did an interview with him, and I because it bugs me. I get hit as a skeptic all the time because I refuse to take everything at face value that people tell me.
Same.
But I also believe that our consciousness is more than just mechanical brain. So I think there's something there. And what I'd like to see is, and science is getting a little better with it, but when I talked to Dr. Massey, I said, why doesn't science take this a little more seriously? I mean, really, it's one of the biggest questions in front of science,
Absolutely.
Not. Why don't they dig into it? And he said, it's a lot of it is a question of reputation. They don't touch it. It's like politics. And the reason for that being is because of all the people on the fringe there that will just So every time I see those people, I kind of want to say, look, do it properly, otherwise we'll always be on the fringe, I guess is my thing.
Well, the problem is it's a subjective field. Even the, heavy duty research that's been done with mind, control, mind, reading, trying to pick up, okay, what electrical signal or chemical signal makes a thought, that kind of stuff. It is so subjective, even with scientific investigation, that nobody is brave enough to put a paper down on it, or at least not in mainstream, because without hard numbers and some provability, they just get laughed at.
Yeah.
The scientific community rejects them. Their paper gets thrown out. They don't get any funding, and they're down the toilet with their career.
Yeah.
So that's the problem.
I think the other thing is the fact that they've actually done that proves bias in some way. Because
absolutely. They have bias. Don't get yourself wrong. They have bias.
Yep. So, where do you think this field will go in the future? Do you think it's going to die out like a phase at some point? Or do you think science is going to take more notice of it if there's enough stuff being found? How do you see it going in the future?
Well, my view of it will be forever. There will be a scientific core of people like you and me that continue to push the boundaries of the science part of it. I think eventually Hollywood will get done with, it won't be a new thing anymore, and there'll be so many ghost shows that people just start tuning out and don't care anymore.
Well, the warrants will run out of case files eventually.
Yeah. And so, and the other thing is unfortunately, Americans, even though we have more technology every day that's coming out, the average American is actually falling back into mysticism and crystals and holistic healing and all of this pseudoscience-y kind of stuff. They're falling back into that because their daily lives are so saturated with social media and news and stuff, and so unfortunately the general populace is moving away from science and not towards it, which is scary to me. It frightens me a bit. I don't know. It's just an impression I've had. Don't you think people, though, are drawn more to, and because the internet, that everything's out there, they're more drawn to things that reinforce their beliefs instead of making them think absolutely. Yeah, which is why the yes group is the yes group and the no group is the no group, and they both set in their own little villages of congregation, and they stew and spin ideas, and they all just do it inside themselves. And then when they try to cross the aisle or post anything in public, they start giant flame wars and nothing happens.
Yeah, which is why, going back to that flame, which is why I'd rather ask a question and say, how do you think that works? Because I'm open. Sure. Crystals can resonate. Crystals are, crystal radios and stuff. So maybe there's something in it. But how do you think it works? Let me know how you think that works. Can you?
Obviously, yeah. And of course, for me, I have pretty much zero, I don't know what you call psychic ability or whatever. I don't feel nothing when I go to places. Now, like my wife, she goes with me on stuff. And although she's definitely not a psychic or a medium or whatever you want to call it, she'll be like, well, this room feels this way or this room feels that way. Maybe not even physically, but when she'll give me her impression of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, whereas I go, it's like, I don't know, it's just another room to me, whatever. And so sometimes that frustrates me because it's like, am I missing something? But then I take instruments through there and they're not showing anything out of the unusual. So I don't know. I just roll with it.
Sometimes I get, an oppressive feeling sometimes, but also I also acknowledge that if you're hyped up to go to this place and this place has a dark area, your imagination starts running wild as well.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's going to interfere with your bias somehow, And
correct.
I think it's important to acknowledge and realize that's happening, and try and leave your beliefs and stuff at the door when you go in.
Sure, absolutely.
I think my trigger is when they have the word, investigator in their names. I don't mind ghost hunter. That's fine. That's a thing. But when they start saying that they're investigators, that's when I start. Really?
Yeah, well, when they say they're investigators, where's your database and where's all your numbers?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess in my own way, I would consider myself an investigator, and I try to get rid of my biases by whatever numbers came off of all these instruments. And if they go into statistical software and the software says there's nothing there, then there's nothing there. If it says there's something there, well, then now it's time to go back there again and hit it again.
Yeah.
And I try to use the computer to take the bias away from myself.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I've had very low hit rate, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah.
And almost every time it's just noise.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's fun. Otherwise, I enjoy doing it.
It's the fun factor. And for me, science is fun. For a lot of people, science is the boring part. I want jump scares. I want lights. I want pitch black with video cameras.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that's nice. I own a really nice set of night vision gear that I got for stuff that was outside of paranormal. And I can walk through a room and see the whole room like it's daylight, even if it's pitch black. And I've taken it on a couple investigations more for the safety of me going down in the basement and not having to turn on the lights than for anything else. I've never seen a ghost with it. I've never seen anything unusual with it. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I enjoy doing it. I understand people that go there that want to experience something, and all that good stuff. But as soon as they slap investigator on their name, that's when I'm like, hang on a minute. No.
Yeah. Show us the science.
Yeah.
Then you can keep your investigator badge.
Yeah. So, no, and I definitely want to stay in touch. So.
Yeah. And then, like I said, sometime, once we get well past the COVID stuff, maybe in fall next year or this year, late this year or something,
Mm-hmm.
I thought it'd be fun for a trip for me and the wife to come out and just do, one guest investigation with you guys. Just show us, show her some of your stuff and see how, play with some numbers. There could be something to it. I mean, eventually you get to the point where you have to at least accept something, because if you just dismiss everything, no matter how hard the data is, you're just, why do it?
No, I'm not dismissing it, but there's always that part of me. That's why I call that book Leaps of Faith. I can take small steps, and then I have to stop and go, wait a minute, and look further. But the more of those things that go on for me, I can take that little more step because I've got a little more data, So that's the way I am. So anyway, thank you very much again. Really appreciate it. And
no problem, and hopefully you can get a good show out of it. And
really appreciate it.
Hey, no problem.
All right,
it's been a great time, and I'm glad there's at least one more of me on this earth.
That's exactly what I thought.
I stumbled across you through, I don't know, 5 different websites, and finally I was like, wait, who is this guy?
Yeah. It's like, hey.
And then I read I downloaded your Kindle book and I started reading it. I was like, no, wait a minute, did I write this book? It was like, wait a minute, I don't remember writing a book.
I've never read. That book started, it wasn't supposed to be a book. We've got the Granger House, and I thought, as a charity, I'd like to do a ghost hunting class there.
Yeah.
And they said, yeah, that's a good idea. And I started writing as a class, and it just wouldn't stop. It was like everything coming out, like what you should do, what you shouldn't do, how and before I knew
I'm glad you did it. It's a good piece of work.
Yeah, thank you. I thought, well, let's just put it out there, see what happens.
Yep.
All righty, sir.
All right, you have a good day.
You too. Stay safe.
You too, man. Stay away from that virus.
So that was the interview with Shane, and thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. You can find our stuff on phantomscience.net, and you'll find all the links to podcast, YouTube, Facebook, and also if you want to buy the book, there's a link there. You can do that too. So I hope some of the ideas that we threw around interest you. It's very good to find out the fundamentals, at least, of how things work before you start throwing them around a haunted building. You know, if you're getting something, it's nice to have a little understanding of what you're actually getting. And as Dr. Massey said, the best thing you can do is try and remove the background. If you can remove the background noise, you get a much better picture. So, anyway, go away now, find a ghost, bring me some evidence.